the call. It's really great to have you all here. Today's actually, I'm really excited because we've got Karen Clarke joining us today. Now, Karen is the author of a book called From Bullied to Brilliant. But Karen's also a keynote speaker. She's the director of a company called Simply for Success. And she's also a qualified NLP trainer. Ultimately, from what I understand from looking at Karen's stuff and listening to some of her audio on her website, and her website is www.FromBulliedToBrilliant.com. Karen's work ultimately is about helping all manner of people, big and small, overcoming issues of confidence and self-esteem. And also, from what I understand, a lot of Karen's work and the stuff that goes in a book is all based on personal experience and the work that she's done with others. So really fabulous to have you here, Karen. Thank you so much for coming on board. We're really excited to have you.
Oh, great. Thanks. No, it's my pleasure. I love talking to people. It's cool.
Wonderful. So can we perhaps start, get you to tell us a little bit about your story and, what led you to, write a book about, bullying?
Well, I was working as a life coach at the time. I'd studied NLP, found it to be fantastic, love NLP. Did some training, got some people all coached up. And then I realized that in order for me to follow my passion, my real passion, I needed to focus in on an area that I was particularly good at. And my husband and I were talking about what sort of tied us together, because he's also very interested in NLP and coaching, and what was there for us as a couple. And we realized and recognized through our stories, through the clients that I'd seen, through the work that I was doing with my own kids, aspects of our own marriage and our own extended family, we realized that one of the major themes was dominant relationships and how people manage themselves in the face of dominant relationships, how they looked after themselves when that came about, and how self-esteem and confidence was tied in with that. So from that discussion, the idea of the book was born, because with my work, I was able to help people transform their situations, turn their situations around really quickly. And then particularly with my own children, putting them in school. So that was a real not shock for me, that was a real challenge for me, was to put young children into school, wanting them to go through school with good confidence and self-esteem, and realizing that suddenly I had lost control over their environment. So how does a parent who raises their children to be conscious and gentle and kind and compassionate, all those things that the majority of us do, what do you do when the child gets to school and the environment doesn't deliver that?
Yeah, look, that's fascinating stuff. And I think a lot of us can perhaps certainly associate with that ourselves. I understand from your profile that you initially started schooling off yourself in the UK, was it? And then moved over to Africa, of all places.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I grew up in the north of England. I'm one of 7 children, 6 brothers. And it was very, at the time, particularly male chauvinist. I can't say now what it's like because I haven't lived there for such a long time. But at the time when I was growing up, north of England was fairly male chauvinist, and an interesting place to grow up as a sort of a gentle soul, as a gentle, quiet, and fairly insecure, I suppose, child. Mostly because I think we grew up in a fairly, we couldn't go out very much when we're 7 kids. It's not like we did an awful lot of socializing. So I grew up with a pony and a hill, and kept to myself a lot. I wasn't very socially able. I wasn't very good at being sociable at school. I wasn't very strong. I wasn't very forceful. I always felt like I was walking to the beat of a different drum. So I found that quite challenging. And I would say that that was where I adopted the idea that I was bullied wasn't the word that was in my head, because you didn't really talk about bullying at the time, but I always felt a bit less than everyone else at school, and I felt quite intimidated. And then my parents moved to the west coast of Africa, as you do. My dad got a job over there and decided that we should all go. So we did a bit of a life change, took the dog and 7 children and uprooted and went to Francophone, French-speaking West Africa, which was even more challenging. So it was quite a journey for me as a young girl.
And was it particularly challenging because, not only were you a young girl and you obviously had your siblings and your parents there, but challenging because of the significant cultural or language differences that you were experiencing at the time?
Yes, well, I was 15 when we moved, so that's quite an iffy time for girls anyway. And I found that moving to a culture that was so different, so different to mine. The language barrier, of course. Um, every aspect of my life was challenged. I felt terribly isolated at that point. My two older brothers were working, three younger ones were fine. They integrated into school. And my next brother down, he was 18 months younger than me. He managed to integrate better. So I felt quite alone. It was a really difficult time. The majority of the people that I was at school with were Lebanese and French and African. I had absolutely nothing in common with almost everybody. It was very, very difficult for me to find anyone to associate with or have any kind of sense of community. I completely lost a sense of community. It was really tough, actually.
And would you say that certainly a lot of children, when they're in that particular situation, they don't have their normal support networks, or they don't have the normal things that make them feel safe and comfortable. That is what can often expose them in some aspect in regards to being bullied or leaving them exposed.
Well, I think having teenagers now, my daughter's 16, so we're in the thick of it. It's quite good, actually. I think for young people, regardless that age, especially the high school years are so difficult for them to manage themselves emotionally that I think they all feel isolated to some degree or another. They all feel alone. They all feel a bit different. They all feel a bit left out. They all have those sort of worries and anxieties that come. So when you have a child like that and you put them in a challenging environment, for instance, for my environment, mine was the change of culture. I think, or what can happen, obviously if there's family breakdowns or there's difficulties within the home. I think it can become overwhelming for them because they're not really self-managing very well anyway.
Yeah, look, I hear you absolutely, and I can certainly see that having a significant impact. Perhaps moving towards the bully, because I think sometimes understanding where we don't want to be or what we have become and we don't like, it can sometimes help us move forward or not become something that we don't want to like. So thinking about the bully now, what would you say is a fairly standard profile of a bully?
Well, your typical profile would be somebody who is, well, for a start, they're lacking in confidence. That would be a given. And I know people contest this. They think that bullies are really sort of the strong-willed and the dominant. But my point is, if you are secure, if you are in a good place, if you do have a real good, strong sense of self and you're on track and you're sort of engaged in life in a meaningful way, you're not going to bully. Like, it's the last thing you're going to do. You may be a dominant personality type, you might be oppressive, but you're not going to spend time intimidating and harming other people. It's certainly not going to be your focus. So a bully would be somebody who is in general, always, they will have some kind of significant pain point in their life, some lack, and it can be many, many things. It can be that they have emotionally distant relationships in the home. It can be that they've had some kind of grief or loss. It can be that they have simply don't have the confidence or the support that they need as human beings. They could have had experienced trauma. So a bully will have lots and lots of reasons why they are, but the typical profile, the ones that we talk about are dominant personality types. They can tend to be overbearing, very insensitive, often narcissistic and unconscious. it depends on to what degree you want to go. There's the very, very serious cases. There's other indicators such as the willingness to harm. For instance, people who cause major trouble are often have a history of harming small animals or willing to harm vulnerable creatures. There's all sorts of indicators, but that's when you're getting into the real dark side of bullying. Your average bully is simply a dominant person, often in a fairly bad mood, looking for someone to take it out on.
Yeah, you're right. Some of those other darker traits, we might call it, certainly start stemming more into the sociopathic or the psychopathic profiles, and certainly are not uncommon in bullies or in a bullying culture, certainly. What about the relationships that bullies have? You know, what are some common things that are present in a relationship that a bully is participating in?
Well, in a bullying relationship, often, you'll always have an imbalance of power. So it will come from, it has to be a relatively close relationship for it to function. So in school, it would be somebody, a classmate, or somebody that has easy access to you or to whoever's being bullied. In a family, it would, what really generally goes on is the bully has some whatever issue it is, we don't need to describe it, but whatever it is, whatever problem they have, they alleviate their pain by projecting it onto another person. So in a marriage, for instance, that person, say it was in the spouse, they would need to feel that they could control the spouse, that they could control their finances, they could control their behavior, they could control who they see, how they dress. It would be and there's varying degrees. Again, it can start quite small and get quite significantly quite traumatic. It can lead to physical violence and other such things. A typical relationship would be there would be an abusive or dominant or aggressive partner, and the victim would be submissive to a degree, or generally they'd have to be submissive in order for the relationship to be sustained. When they weren't submissive, it would go quite wrong.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything you're saying, and particularly the bit that stood out for me was where you talked about a bully is ultimately someone who is inflicting their own fears on those around them, because I definitely see bullying very much as a fear-driven, for want of a better word, a fear-driven exercise. I know we mostly associate bullying to playgrounds. I mean, that's where we hear about it a lot, but I often also see bullying, in fact, is probably even a little bit more common in the workplace. What do you think is the underlying cause of bullying in the workplace? Do you think it is, in fact, actually fear-driven, or do you think there are more other characteristics at play there as well?
I think all bullying basically stems from patterning. So a person is a bully, whether it's in the home or in the workplace or at school, they will be acting out the same pattern regardless. The drive will be the same. So I believe that people bully because they have failed to address their own pain point, whatever it is that they have going on. So the trigger is the cause is always the same. The cause in every situation is always the same. That's why it's so simple. It's easy to talk about at the end of the day. There's no difference between workplace bullying in the playground, or spousal abuse. It's the same thing. It's the same problem. And the only way you can really address it, if you wish to address it, is by understanding the game that's being played, if you like. So there's a game that's played out between a bully and a victim. And I might add, in order for that to happen, the victim has to play. This is where my message becomes extremely unpopular, because I actually find people getting incredibly upset when they say the victim has to play, but they have to play. They have to show up and they have to play. I think it was Woody Allen. I can remember somebody said, what if there was a war and no one showed up? At the end of the day, in order for this to happen, you have to show up. Now, I am talking from really from personal experience here as well as professional experience, but in a workplace, you have to accept that you are playing the game with the bully in order for it to continue. You have to be part of the story.
I definitely agree with that as well. I remember, when I was a kid as well, I got bullied when I was at school, particularly early high school. And my father always used to say to me, just ignore them. Because if you're not giving them the reaction they're seeking, they'll just move on to someone else, which at the time really wasn't the easiest thing to do. But in fact, it was also very sage advice, because what he was ultimately saying, which is just what you were saying, is that, if you don't participate, if you don't play their game, the game just doesn't exist. It can't actually happen.
Yes, and they'll look for somebody else, unfortunately, and that's why our schools or workplaces need to step in. They need to interrupt that cycle from the point of view of stopping people from bullying. That's why they need to try and interrupt the cycle from that point of view. But as far as looking after the victims, because a lot of bullying also is simply psychological. It's not physical. It's not. People are. There is physical violence, of course, in schools, but the majority of it is not physical. So you need the skills. You need to develop skills to handle the situation. Now, parents have known through the ages how to handle bullying. We just never really listened. But also, I think it's good that you listened to your dad. It's great. A lot of the advice seems at the time, because people would say to me, "Oh, ignore them, they're jealous," for instance. Now, that didn't work for me as a child, because I was really insecure, so I couldn't figure out why anyone would be jealous of me. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how people can be jealous of you if you have, in my mind, nothing to offer. But what I didn't understand was the intricacies of the mind. People can be jealous because because you have a stable family home. They can be jealous because of your, I don't know, anything. It's amazing what people can find to be hostile about. So when you understand that the other people's psychology is different to yours, the way other people look at the world, the things that challenge other people are different, and allow sort of yourself to have to permit the idea that people are operating with different information to you, you can stop taking it so personally. It's the key. The key is to not take it personally, to understand that these behaviors will play out if you're there or not. So then the choice is, are you going to play or not?
I agree, and I love the way you're putting that too. I mean, bullying I see very much as a fear-driven construct, and jealousy is no different. I mean, the jealousy that anybody feels is a fear-driven construct, but not about the person that they're jealous about, but in fact whatever is insecure within themselves, which is obviously a key driving force in regards to bullying as well.
Jealousy is really interesting, actually. I think jealousy is jealousy is the most toxic emotion, because it's unquenchable. So I realized that this was through bitter personal experience. I realized after 2 long-term relationships, I figured out that it is impossible to calm a jealous person, that if they have that inside of them, you cannot help them. If you're the partner, you cannot. So by the time I got to my 3rd relationship, I said, if you have the tiniest inkling that you're going to be jealous, or the tiniest element of you that feels they're going to be jealous, you need to take it and go and deal with it elsewhere, because it's not my problem. I'm not dealing with it. I'm tired of trying to deal with other people's jealousy. It's absolute rubbish. That's not my problem. That's your problem. It's one of those things you absolutely have to put your foot down. It's nothing, because, and the only reason I know this is because I tried everything in my power, and I figured out at the end it doesn't work. All that happens is they shift their jealousy to another thing that you have to do, or another act, or another gesture, or another, God knows, it's a terrible emotion.
And that's because it's not about you at all. It's actually about them.
It's completely about them. Yeah, again, it's like they're carrying a pain point. So their pain point might be jealousy. Well, that's their pain point. And that is really probably one of the core things I'm trying to communicate as in the bully victim relationship is there are certain responsibilities. I can't remember the saying. I think it might be an Arabic saying, but they say, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and the rest is for God. Like, take responsibility for your own stuff, but don't try and give me your stuff. It's not mine, it's your stuff.
Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. One thing I'm really excited about with you coming along is the real reason why behind Joe asking you to come on tonight to talk to us about bullying. And a lot of that is about our collective viewpoint associated with network marketing. Now, as part of the early discussions we were having, you shared the idea of the fact that you're not a fan of network marketing. And to be quite honest, I personally fully respect that because, in all honesty with you, I'm not a fan of it either. And a lot of that comes from a past experience shaping my belief system associated with the fact that the old Amway days or the old days of old school network marketing was all about high pressure. It was all about bullying people into submission and to doing things they perhaps didn't really want to do, or just ultimately coercing people, which is all part of that manipulation metric. What we here at Heart and Integrity really seek, and the reason why we have the words Heart and Integrity in our team name is because we believe with working with integrity is we don't need to, we shouldn't need to apply pressure. We shouldn't need to coerce, manipulate or bully people to do that. We're very, very lucky in that regard. It's definitely made easier by the simple fact we have a product that is so remarkable that, it kind of sells itself. But what I know Karen and Joe and myself and a lot of others in the team kind of want to understand is we don't want to be bullies. That's not why we're here. We're here for the product and connecting the product with people. We do know that over time and stuff like that, things can change. And certainly we see in network marketing, particularly recently with the fall of one network marketing company and the kind of setting upon by all the other network companies on to those people who are now out of a job, so to speak, we really started to notice this type of dog-eat-dog mentality that kind of goes along with it all, which we strongly all disagreed with. Can you tell me, what can you share with us that might help us understand the other side of bullying? Sometimes if we can put ourselves in the shoes of the other party, it helps us best empathize with what's going on and gives us a little bit of perspective. So what can you share with us from a bullying perspective, particularly in regards to your interpretation of network marketing, so that we can perhaps hear that aspect as well, and maybe even give us some tips to try and help us ensure that we are connecting with people and not manipulating people?
Well, you've sort of said the right words already. You've talked about connecting with people, and that is the key. The key is to be mindful of boundaries now, and that's actually a tricky concept to get across. The fact that you've called your group Heart and Integrity, which I didn't know, by the way, is really, really good because you're setting an intention. Communication is really fundamentally, it's about intention, but it also needs to be done with consciousness and awareness. So the difficulty that I think people have in network marketing is often that their enthusiasm transcends their sensitivity to the situation. So if it's done with integrity and with good intention, it's okay, but it still can be offensive. And this is inadvertent. Some people would see it as inadvertent bullying because it depends on how they look at it. But your problem is that many people struggle with saying no. And this is a real problem. This is a real problem. And I found this with the bully victim dynamic. The biggest problem, the biggest sort of indicator to me that somebody is likely to be a victim is that they are incapable of saying no. And they find it actually offensive to be put in a situation where they have to say no.
Yeah, look, I agree with you there. And this whole inability to say no, I know some people refer to it as the disease to please. And you're right. It is certainly a challenging issue, and it's very, in fact, in my opinion, very easy to take advantage of some people that are in that particular situation. And from a team perspective, that's definitely something we're trying to avoid.
Yes.
Can you tell us, are there any particular, I mean, obviously you yourself as someone who is a professional or an expert in your field, particularly helping individuals working through this. And I'm assuming you do one-on-one sessions or you do coaching sessions and stuff, and you make yourself available, to people for those sorts of things.
Yes.
Are there any wider type of groups that some people that can go to? Is there any type of groups that people can rely on, or information that they can get a hold of, perhaps in addition to your book and the stuff on your website, that you could perhaps recommend that might be able to help people that find themselves or know of someone that's in a bullying situation?
People that are being bullied, you're saying?
Yes, people that have been bullied, yes.
Other resources for them?
Correct, yes, thank you.
Yes. Well, the reason I wrote my book was because I struggled to find really good resources. That's why I wrote it.
Sure. And I think a lot of resources are also geared toward children as well, aren't they?
A lot of resources, yes. A lot of resources are geared towards children, and that is why I wrote my book. I wrote my book for adults. So I wrote my book so people would understand relationships and understand themselves in the face of those relationships. I don't know. I haven't thought about anybody else. There's a lot of work. A lot of the research that I've done is really has taken me to books that are for children. I'm just thinking. I mean, a lot of personal growth and development books. I mean, I've got there's wonderful resources. Eckhart Tolle's work is fantastic.
Adore him. I love him.
Work is fantastic. Yeah,
yes.
Tony Robbins' work is fantastic.
Fabulous. Yes.
Personally, I like Neil Donald Walsh's books. They're fantastic.
Yeah, big fan of his.
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich. I mean, really, if you're on a journey of self-discovery, that would be the way I would go. That's how to find yourself. You need to find your voice. The problem for people who are struggling with dominant relationships is not having a voice. It's not having, not being heard, and not being heard by yourself. Ultimately, it's a relationship with yourself. When you build your self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem to a point where you're taking care of yourself, you won't put up with rubbish relationships. You won't put up with people's nonsense. You'll know how to put your foot down, and that's really the bottom line.
Yeah, look, I agree, and it's an interesting thing. Would you agree that a lot of people that are being bullied, they find themselves quite isolated? It's almost like they can't reach out or they can't ask for help. I know certainly as a child in my early teens, it took me a long time to talk to my father about the fact that I was being bullied. I was glad once I did, of course, and I think most people usually are when they seek advice and they get that help. But do you find that isolation and that inability to perhaps reach out and seek help is a really big issue?
It is a really big issue, and that's why I'm talking to schools. I'm trying to demystify bullying. I'm trying to take the shame out of it for the bullies as well. By the way, when I do my work, the intention is to try and lift up all parties, because if you lift up people who are bullying and help them find their voice, then they'll cease. Like I said, the behavior will cease when they find their confidence and self-esteem, or they find their purpose, or they manage to put themselves back on track. So it's really, yes, it's very common for people to be ashamed, but that's why I'm making such a lot of noise. I'm trying to eliminate the idea that this is shameful on either side. Yes. It's not shameful. It's just lack of information. It's lack of growth and development. It's lack of knowledge. It's lack of self-care. It's simply a matter of time. If you're willing to change the pattern, it literally is just a matter of time. And sometimes not that much. Sometimes it's just a shift in thinking or a deeper understanding of yourself. It doesn't take very long.
I agree. And look, I really love your thinking there as well, that a lot of people want to focus on the people being bullied, but I talk about that in difficult situations we offer love to to the situation, and the energy, the negative energy associated with it dissipates. You know, you're talking exactly the same sort of thing by offering compassion to the bully as well, because the bully is in the dark space too, and shame and guilt as well, you know, is often rife in those type of situations. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to focus on the victim because it's an obvious thing for us to focus on, and they definitely need support and help and everything like that. But, you know, compassion and guidance and support to the bully as well can also help change that cycle that's been going on over and over again.
Yes. Well, in fact, I would suggest that the bully is in worse shape, because at the end of the day, the victim probably has got an idea of, or a conscious awareness of what's happening. The bully may not. I think it's much worse to not know that you're in trouble than to know you're in trouble. You know, you're one step ahead as a victim. At least you know you're uncomfortable. Sometimes bullies are bullying and projecting and causing suffering, and they don't even know what they're doing. They haven't even figured it out. You know, I have a lot of compassion for those people. I certainly don't put myself in front of them if they're, you know, going to have a go. That's not where I'm going to place myself, but I do feel for them. And the people, and I'm talking honestly here, from people who've really, really hurt me in the past, been really extremely hostile and caused great suffering. I still have compassion for them, but I just don't put myself in their space.
Sure. I agree.
Sort of how it works. Yes, but someone else, hopefully, they will go and find the help they need from somebody else. They will go where they need to get that help. I really would like for them to get that help, because ultimately, if one of us is suffering, all of us are suffering.
I agree. I agree very much so. Thank you so much, Karen. That was fabulous to hear from you. It was lovely to meet you and to take on board your words of wisdom there. Everybody, this was Karen Clarke tonight, the author of a book called From Bullied to Brilliant. And if you need to get a hold of a copy of the book, or you want to have a look at the information that she has, you can go to www.FromBulliedToBrilliant.com as well and grab what you need from there. Thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate your time tonight. It's been great.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Thank you.